The early morning sun spread a golden hue across the wide, open fields of Ashwood County. Birds chirped in harmony, cattle grazed lazily near the fence line, and the soft whir of a tractor echoed in the distance. Life was simple and honest here, exactly the way Hank Walters liked it. At 63, Hank had long since traded city chaos for boots, barns, and barley. His farm, 3 Pines acres, was a sprawling stretch of land passed down through generations. It was his pride, his peace, and unbeknownst to most, it was also a big chunk of Ashwood County itself. The serenity of the morning was abruptly shattered by the metallic roar of engines and the shrill beeping of construction vehicles. Hank, coffee mug in hand and still in his plaid pajamas, stepped onto his porch to witness an absurd sight. 3 massive bulldozers were parked right across the entrance to his driveway, blocking the gravel path entirely. Dust swirled in the air, and a tall, tightly wound woman with a clipboard and an expression that could sour milk strutted around like she owned the place. "Excuse me," Hank called out, eyebrows raised. The woman spun around, eyes narrowing behind oversized sunglasses. "You must be the farmer. HOA business, sir. We're executing a beautification and traffic reduction project. This entryway will be permanently sealed for community safety. You'll need to find another route." She didn't ask, she announced. Hank blinked. "I'm sorry, you're what now?" The woman clicked her pen and walked closer, flashing a badge that said HOA President Karen Davenport. Her tone was syrupy but smug. "You'll get used to it. It's for the greater good. We've received complaints about unsightly vehicles and agricultural equipment. It's an eyesore for the residents, you understand." "Residents?" Hank asked slowly, scanning the empty county road. "The nearest neighbor is 10 miles west." Karen smirked. "Oh, that won't be the case for long. We're developing this whole stretch. Soon it'll be a planned community with gates, tennis courts, and no tractors. It's already under our jurisdiction, according to the latest petition." Hank took a slow sip of coffee, not saying a word. He looked past Karen at the bulldozers, at his now-blocked driveway, and at the absurdity unfolding before him. Something told him this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a hostile takeover, dressed in a pantsuit and powered by HOA politics. And it had just rolled right onto his land. He gave her a nod, his face unreadable. "Well, this'll be interesting." And with that, Hank turned back into his house, but not before Karen called after him. "You might want to start complying, Mr. Walters. The HOA doesn't tolerate rebellion." He didn't respond, but inside something was already starting to burn. The next morning, Hank stood at the edge of his porch, arms folded, watching the bulldozers like a farmer guarding against a storm cloud. The machines hadn't moved an inch. Neither had Karen. She was back, of course, heels clicking over gravel like it was a marble floor, barking orders into a Bluetooth headset, waving that clipboard like a sheriff's badge. Workers in bright vests moved like ants around her, hammering in orange cones and signs that read, "Private property, HOA development in progress." Hank walked over, calm but firm. "You realize this here is my land, don't you?" Karen didn't even look up from her clipboard. "Actually, according to our documents, this road is being incorporated into the HOA master plan. You failed to attend the community planning meeting, which constitutes consent." "I didn't attend," Hank said slowly, "because I wasn't invited. There ain't even a community out here yet." Karen gave him a tight, patronizing smile. "That's exactly why we're here. Progress waits for no one. You're clinging to a fatting way of life, Mr. Walters. The HOA has big plans for this land. Walking trails, dog parks, maybe even a Starbucks. You'll thank us later." Hank raised an eyebrow. "By blocking my only way in and out." Karen clucked her tongue. "Temporarily. Once we finish the perimeter fencing and establish the new road design, you'll have controlled access through Gate 3, with HOA-issued decals, of course. No more of those noisy tractors scaring the investors." Hank nearly laughed, but it came out as a dry scoff. "And what happens if I don't go along with this nonsense?" Karen blinked slowly, lips curling into a condescending grin. "Then we'll have to escalate. Fines, legal notices, property reassessments. It's all in the charter." Hank's eyes narrowed. "Lady, I didn't sign no charter." Karen tapped her clipboard. But the county did. Technically, it's binding, and since you're just a tenant of this land. I own this land, Hank cut in sharply. Every acre from here to the river bend. Karen laughed. You own it. That's adorable. Look, Mr. Walters, if you'd like to file a formal complaint, you can attend the next HOA meeting. Second Wednesday of the month. That'll be in the clubhouse, which once again isn't built yet. Then, as if she'd already dismissed him, Karen turned on her heel and strutted off, barking more orders at the construction crew. Hank stood there for a moment longer, jaw clenched. The gall of this woman was almost impressive. Almost. She parked 3 bulldozers on his driveway, blocked him in, and now wanted to leash him with HOA decals and Starbucks lattes. He walked back into the house and sat down in his worn leather chair, flipping open a dusty folder from his grandfather's desk. Deeds, maps, ownership rights. Yeah, Karen had no idea who she was dealing with. He wasn't just a farmer, he was the county. And it was time to remind her. 3 days passed, and the situation only got worse. The bulldozers remained in place like oversized statues of defiance. Karen had doubled down, bringing in a mobile trailer she called the HOA command post and setting up folding tables and blueprints right on Hank's gravel. Signs started popping up, future site of Ashwood Meadows. Coming soon, a gated lifestyle and private property, trespassers will be prosecuted. Hank's own mailbox had been unceremoniously removed and replaced with a shiny HOA drop box. He watched the circus unfold from his porch, boots tapping against the old wood, lips pressed in a thin line. It wasn't just disrespect. It was trespassing, arrogance, and stupidity rolled into one pastel-colored HOA package. The nerve of these people. Karen acted like she was building the next Versailles, and Hank was just a bumpkin squatting in the way of progress. The final straw came when he returned from feeding the horses and found 2 workers nailing an official HOA violation notice to his barn door. Apparently, his barn color did not conform to approved pallet guidelines, and he was being fined $200 per day until corrective paintwork was completed. He calmly walked up to the men. You fellas lost. One of them chuckled nervously. We're just doing what the lady told us, HOA regulations. Do them regulations also cover slapping junk on private property without permission? They hesitated, then scurried off, leaving the notice half flapping in the wind. Hank peeled it off and read it again, his nostrils flaring. This wasn't boldness, it was delusion. Karen had somehow convinced herself she had jurisdiction, that this quiet corner of the world needed managing, tamming, paving. She thought he was just a stubborn old farmer clinging to rust and tradition. She didn't know he held the original deed to most of the county land in his fireproof safe. She didn't know the county commissioner owed him 3 favors. And she certainly didn't know that the road she'd blocked wasn't public at all. It was a private access easement granted only to Hank's family generations ago. Hank sat down at his kitchen table, laid out the deed papers, and made a few calls. The county clerk remembered him immediately. Oh, Hank, what's going on out there? We've been hearing rumors about some development mess. Not rumors, he replied. A hostile invasion. They're blocking my drive, claiming jurisdiction, fining me for my barn paint. There was a pause, then laughter. Oh, Lord, HOA tried to regulate you. They must not know. They don't, but they're about to. As the sun dipped low and the fields glowed in amber, Hank's calm settled into something colder. This wasn't just a dispute. It was a war, and he wasn't going to fight it with rage. He was going to fight it smart. By Monday morning, Hank was a man on a mission. He rolled into the county courthouse in his old blue pickup, documents in a leather folder riding shotgun. The staff at the front desk greeted him with warm smiles. Everyone in Ashwood County knew Hank Walters. He wasn't just the guy with the biggest piece of land. He was on the historical registry, a major donor to the local 4-H, and the man who'd helped fund the restoration of the old town library. If Ashwood had roots, Hank was part of them. He stepped into the county assessor's office first, greeted by Roberta, a tough old bird who didn't suffer fools or fake nails. She flipped through his papers, eyes narrowing. Karen Davenport filed a development jurisdiction claim over land she doesn't own, she muttered. She filed it under a public access zoning claim. Problem is that road she blocked. It's private. Always has been, Hank replied. Roberta pulled out a dusty ledger and cross-checked his deed. She didn't even file with the right department. Lord help her. Next, he swung by the zoning commission, then the historical preservation board, then the sheriff's office. Each stop confirmed what Hank already knew. Karen was overstepping massively, and not just in an annoying, clipboard-waving way. Legally, she was trespassing, obstructing private access, and making unauthorized changes to a protected historical agricultural site. Each official grew more and more alarmed. Each one promised swift action. But Hank wasn't looking for swift. He was looking for spectacular. That night, he returned home and stood at the edge of his porch, staring out at the HOA command post trailer. Karen was inside, her silhouette visible through the flimsy blinds, sipping from a wine glass and probably planning which ficus trees matched the tennis court fencing. Hank grinned, slow and wicked. The trap was beginning to form in his mind, not just a legal counter, but a public spectacle. She wanted to build a community? Fine, let her build one. Let her invite all her future residents, realtors, investors, and backers. Let her show off her grand plans right on his land. And when the curtain lifted, let her discover the stage had already been sold and the spotlight was on her. He spent the next few days contacting local press. He invited the Historical Society, the Sheriff's Department, and the Zoning Board to an emergency public clarification meeting. He booked the town square gazebo for the following Saturday. He called in every favor he had from county officials, reminding them, politely, that this was his land and her project was a legal house of cards. The trap wasn't just legal, it was theatrical. Karen thought she was conquering a sleepy farmer. She didn't realize he was quietly assembling a reckoning. Hank spent the week laying his groundwork with the precision of a man planting seeds he knew would sprout perfectly. Each call, each visit, each shared photocopy of old deeds and permits added another layer to the plan. By Friday, he had a neat stack of cease and desist letters, a county historical preservation order, and a statement from the sheriff confirming his full rights to the driveway, land, and easement Karen had so boldly commandeered. But Hank didn't stop there. No, that would be too kind. He printed glossy invitations. Yes, invitations emblazoned with Ashwood Meadows Grand Preview, come see the future. He used Karen's own slogan, copied right off the signs she'd stuck in his field. And with the help of a couple of mischievous nephews, those flyers were posted all around town. Coffee shops, gas stations, grocery store corkboards. He even mailed a few directly to local real estate offices and development firms. The best part, he listed his address as the venue. Saturday morning, the trap was ready. Hank set up rows of hay bales in the wide clearing near his barn, right next to where Karen's trailer still squatted like a plastic pimple on the land. A big wooden sign read, "Welcome to Ashwood Meadows, the truth behind the fantasy." By 10 a.m., curious townsfolk and officials were arriving. Fold-out chairs filled fast. The sheriff leaned against his cruiser, arms crossed, eyes on the bulldozers. Local reporters began filming, capturing the odd clash of country charm and HOA chaos. And right in the middle of it all, Karen stepped out of her trailer in full-blown realtor regalia, navy pantsuit, heels sinking into dirt, a frozen smile that cracked the moment she saw the crowd. "What is this?" she hissed, storming toward Hank. "Your preview event," Hank replied, deadpan. "Didn't want to steal your thunder." She blinked. "You invited people using my marketing." "Sure did. Thought they'd want to see the full picture, including the zoning maps, land ownership records, and the cease and desist letters you're about to receive." Karen's face blanched as she spotted the county commissioner shaking hands with the sheriff. Then the Historical Society president stepped up with a clipboard. "Ms. Davenport," the woman said crisply, "you've constructed on protected heritage farmland. That's a violation of Statute 48B. "And blocked a private access road," the sheriff added, strolling over. "Got the original easement document right here." The crowd, now buzzing with murmurs and smirks, turned to Karen. She looked from face to face, her fake smile melting. "This is ridiculous. This land is under development. I had permits." Hank, arms folded, leaned in with a grin. No, ma'am, you had paper dreams on someone else's dirt. The air buzzed with awkward silence as Karen stood surrounded by a semicircle of officials, reporters, and bemused townsfolk. Her eyes darted from the sheriff's copy of the cease and desist to the zoning commissioner, who was already flipping through his own binder with a grim expression. Cameras flashed. Cell phones recorded. It was the HOA version of a public hanging. Hank stepped forward, holding up a rolled map. "Just so everyone's clear," he said, his voice carrying across the field. "This here is the original land plot deed recorded in 1912 passed through my family line. It outlines every acre, including the road this woman here bulldozed over and claimed as public domain. That's private access, my access. Her development plans, not only illegal but laughably misinformed." A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. One of the reporters asked, "Ms. Davenport, did you know this land was protected?" Karen's mouth opened, then closed. I was told it was under future jurisdiction once incorporated. The HOA has expansion rights. This was approved by the advisory board." "Which advisory board?" the county commissioner asked, raising an eyebrow. Karen blinked. "Well, the HOA planning subcommittee. I'm the chair." "So you approved yourself?" Karen stammered, "There's a process." "Which you skipped," the zoning officer cut in. "You never filed with our office, and you installed construction vehicles and signage without permit. That's trespassing and unauthorized land development. You'll be cited, possibly fined." Hank couldn't resist. "Guess I should have painted my barn lavender after all, huh?" Laughter erupted across the field, reporters scribbling furiously. Karen's face turned a dangerous shade of pink, her lips trembling as she tried to maintain composure. The sheriff handed her a yellow envelope. "You'll need to remove all HOA materials, vehicles, and structures from this property within 48 hours. Any delay, and we'll move them ourselves." "But the investors, my open house, this was supposed to be a model community," Karen blurted, spinning toward the gathering crowd who were now visibly enjoying her meltdown. "I was beautifying the area." A farmer in the back called out, "You bulldozed over a goat fence." Another added, "And replaced it with a wine trailer." As laughter and commentary piled on, Karen staggered back toward her trailer, muttering into her phone. Hank watched with satisfaction as she tripped slightly on her own clipboard. A cameraman caught the moment perfectly. By midday, most of the crowd had dispersed, but not before helping themselves to lemonade and Hank's storytelling. Karen's command post now looked more like a failed flea market booth, a symbol of arrogance defeated by dirt-road common sense. And Hank, he tipped his hat, climbed back onto his porch, and sipped sweet tea with the slow satisfaction of a man who didn't just win. He taught a lesson. Karen's humiliation was far from over. The footage from the Ashwood Meadows Grand Preview went semi-viral across local news stations and online forums. Titles like "HOA President Tries to Steal Farmers' Land" fails spectacularly, and Karen bulldozes wrong driveway started trending in the state's suburban Facebook groups. One particularly brutal meme featured a photo of Karen mid-scream, overlaid with the caption, "When your HOA authority meets a deed from 1912. She had become a cautionary tale. The following day, she returned, not in heels and sunglasses, but in sneakers, sweatpants, and a baseball cap pulled low. She tried to sneak around the back to her trailer, hopping to avoid any attention. But the sheriff was already there, tapping the hood of one of the bulldozers with a notepad. 48 hours, Karen," he reminded her. "That includes the heavy machinery." Karen hissed something under her breath and disappeared inside the trailer. A few minutes later, she was back outside, shouting into her phone. "No, I don't have another site. I told you this was approved. No, I didn't personally check the zoning office because I didn't think I had to." She paused, listening, then screamed, "Don't you dare pull funding. This was going to be the crown jewel of HOA development." The construction crew, who had been lingering, hopping for clarity, slowly began packing up. One guy shrugged at Hank and muttered, "Sorry, man, we just go where the clipboard tells us." By that afternoon, the bulldozers were gone. So was the mobile office. All that remained were tire tracks, a broken cone, and a very bruised ego. Karen stood alone at the edge of the driveway, arms crossed, glaring out over the land like it had personally betrayed her. Hank wandered over, hands in his pockets. "Something wrong?" he asked with mock concern. She whipped around, eyes wild. "You don't get it. I was trying to make this place better, cleaner, valuable." "It already was," Hank said plainly. "You just couldn't see past the barn paint." Karen scoffed and looked away. "You ruined everything." He chuckled softly. "No, Karen, you did that. I just stood still long enough for you to trip over yourself." She stomped to her SUV and slammed the door so hard a hubcap rattled. As the tires kicked up dust down the long, unpaved road, Hank exhaled deeply and looked up at the sky, feeling something better than relief. Victory! And poetic justice. The following week was blissfully quiet. The birds sang louder, the cows seemed calmer, and the driveway, once dominated by steel and arrogance, was once again just gravel and peace. Hank replaced the mailbox, rehung the barn sign, and even repainted a portion of the fence just because he could. No more HOA cones. No more violation notices taped to his barn. No more clipboard-wielding nonsense. Karen, it turned out, had bigger problems now. Word spread quickly through the county's real estate and development circles. Her funding had been pulled. Two of her business partners had backed out completely after the public fiasco. A third, a firm based out of the city, had quietly issued a statement distancing itself from unauthorized zoning activities. By the time the local newspaper ran a Sunday feature titled "The Farmer Who Beat the HOA," Karen had already resigned from her HOA presidency, for personal reasons. Hank read the article aloud over breakfast, laughing to himself as he buttered his toast. He clipped it out and pinned it on his fridge, right next to the faded picture of him holding up his first prize hog from 1978. By midweek, a group of local high schoolers from the Ag Club asked if they could interview him for their spring project. "We want to learn about property rights and land stewardship," one girl explained, "and also how to deal with people like Karen." Hank chuckled and invited them out for lemonade and stories. He even considered putting up a sign at the end of his drive. "Welcome to Three Pines Acres, HOA free since forever." Life returned to its normal rhythm. Tractors came and went, the rooster crowed at ungodly hours, and the only gate that mattered was the one Hank built himself years ago. Simple, sturdy, and swinging open to anyone who came with respect. As for Karen, last Hank heard, she was trying to pitch a tiny development project 2 counties over in a place where nobody knew her name. But people talk. And thanks to the magic of the internet and a meme-loving nephew, it's safe to say her HOA ambitions would never quite recover. One afternoon, as Hank sat on his porch sipping sweet tea, he grinned to himself. He didn't just win a land dispute. He protected a way of life. And in the process, taught a lesson that would echo across every HOA meeting for miles. Never mess with a man who owns the county. Especially if he has a tractor, a deed, and a whole lot of patience.